Welcome to the Flow of Money podcast.
This is where high performance meets financial intelligence. In these discussions, we combine the performance science of flow and flow states with practical wealth management strategies.
The intent is to build a resource for those who believe that high performance mental states can impact wealth and abundance in all its forms so that you can make the impact you want in the time that you have.
Let's get started.
My name is John O'Dea, and I'm a financial advisor. My love is cash flow. I truly love the cash flow generated by businesses for the positive impact that this cash flow can have on the owners, their employees, and their broader community. And this cash flow is never more important than when the owners of these businesses start to execute their exit and succession plan. I just love it all and can't wait to help.
I'm Dave Gieselman, flow state coach, breathwork facilitator, and former chef turned high performance nerd. I help leaders and creatives build clarity, confidence, and capacity, teaching the science of staying cool under pressure so you can think clearly and execute fast, especially when things go sideways. John O'Dea.
Dave Gieselman. Awesome. I'm ready to do this. Let's talk some flow, baby.
Let's talk flow. So last episode we talked about sort of general states, and you are at least flow curious. Let's have that conversation.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about a little bit of the origin story of this conversation, right? The flow of money, the intentional selection of the word flow wasn't necessarily around, it was an expansive definition of flow. In addition to how money flows in and around your life, it was the intentional selection of flow as are there flow state concepts that we can apply as mere humans in our efforts to increase our mastery of wealth and money and finances and abundance in a corporal way. So, last episode we talked a lot about flow states. What are they? How do they show up? The sort of breathy one that we get intentionally designed around meditative states. There's a flow states that we intentionally trigger around work and performance and sports and things like that. So the different styles and approaches. And what came up in that conversation was this concept or idea that you bubbled up to the surface that there are intentional triggers that tend to be associated with or aligned with or predict when you might, as a human, experience a flow state shortly thereafter, right? Trigger. What are the flow triggers that might help you enter into and leverage this optimized mental state? So what I was hoping we could talk about today, let's play with your triggers. Can I trigger you? Can we talk about triggers a little bit?
Yeah. And so there's 22 different flow triggers, individual flow, group flow, all kinds of things. There are 10 that I think really align with the financial conversation that we're currently having. The conversation we have around wealth, around making money, around investing, around growing that thing. And one of the flow triggers is clear goals, right? And before we get started, let me back this up and say, once we stack up about 5 of these triggers, most human beings drop in, most between 5 and 7. So one of these, just having one of these doesn't get you there. But if you are in a conversation, in an environment, in a thing where we're seeing 5 to 7 of these, most cases, we will drop into a really optimized cognitive state and be able to feel real good about what we're doing and begin moving at an accelerated rate.
So it's not just as we go through these, hey, I've got one of these, I'm going to get there. We got to stack them to some degree, and it might take some intention and effort. And then as you describe this, I'm also, before we even get into the triggers, it also does start to feel like it will be those triggers for a long enough period of time. Like, is the duration that you're experiencing it also important to talk about before we get into the triggers?
Yeah. So when we do this, it is a sustained effort. So you nailed it with intention, right? We are not going to accidentally trip into flow state. That is not how it happens. We set up environments. Where flow is accessible. We set up environments where we can generate the environment where flow happens, right? And so when I work with professionals, we talk about setting up your work environment, setting up your calendar, setting up your day, setting up your schedule, setting up, sort of your computer, how you are setting things up so that you can drop into flow and then have long enough time in that state to really be productive. Because if you hit flow state, but you only get 5 minutes in it, it doesn't buy you much.
Right. Okay.
All of these things we're talking about, having these triggers, having access to these triggers, being able to stay in a place where these things are present for 20 to 90 minutes. If you can create a block of time where you can have a bunch of these triggers in place, 20 to 90 minutes, what you will find is a real excitement around what you're talking about and a real sense of productivity in the area of finance, investing, whatever you're trying to generate flow state in.
So I think that's super helpful, and that seems to, uh, that number from a time standpoint seems to show up in other areas where you're trying to optimize cognitive states, right? If you're working on mental improvement and using meditation as a technique, sometimes the suggestion is advancement or improvement doesn't happen until you're focused in that intentional way beyond 20 minutes, that 30, 40, 50 minutes of effort, even though a 10 to 15-minute quick meditation has its own power and utility. So, time, I think, as we get into this, as we talk about the triggers of the characteristics that are likely to produce this cognitive state of enhanced mental performance, one of the things to remember is we probably can't block out or have snatches of time, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes between. So I block out meetings of 45 minutes. I have 15-minute block before my next meeting. Probably not the right time to try to enter into flow state on an important project.
100%. That is
Okay.
absolutely correct.
Okay.
It is also correct in saying that if you have an hour-long block with a client, the two of you can create an environment where the two of you have some time to co-create a financial vision, a financial future, and enter a state of group flow where you're really getting some great work done, really getting some good imaginative work done, some creative work done, creating real possibilities for financial growth with a potential client or with a client.
Well, I think that's fascinating. So I want to come back to that because I think that came up in our flow discussion around what is flow. There's an individual felt sense of my own experience of flow. I'm working on a project and time extends in a unique way and my productivity accelerates mentally from a process standpoint. But a lot of my own personal felt experience of those sorts of flow states as I look back have often been a uniquely solo endeavor. But as we talked about that, there are flow states that get triggered in group dynamics in terms of group. And the example that you used was, in musicianship, right? In collaboration around a clear goal of executing a musical piece, jazz musicians, other musicians collaborating together. That group flow state is also following some of the same process associated with this. So in professional world, a professional delivering a service to another human being, a physician, an attorney, an accountant who is there present for their client could potentially leverage into some of these conversations triggers that might make that time together more productive by entering into a group flow state.
Percent.
Okay.
Another great example is
Super helpful.
being in like a concert, right? Everybody in a concert, there's all kinds of flow triggers in a concert. And so if you've ever been to like a really sort of transcendent musical concert experience or live music experience, the whole thing happens and you're just completely in it. You're in it with the people around you and it kind of just comes and goes and happens really fast. And you end up leaving this venue with this really cool kind of shared sense of experience. You were all just in flow state. You were all, for the most part, kind of experiencing the same unique sort of thing. So one person can have individual flow, two or more can have group flow. As long as the triggers are there and there for long enough for that thing to happen, you get to have it and you get to experience it. Which is why some people love live music as much as they do, because they get to experience flow state.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think one of my favorite parts of any live performance is especially that time when the relationship between musician, right? The entertainer, right? The professional, and their connection to the crowd grows to the point where there's, co-singing, and right, the group is singing, audience is singing along, and they get to then riff on top of that, right? And some of that process, that connection, they seem to be enjoying themselves, whether act right, they're connected to the joy of the delivery of that performance. There are those moments where the crowd takes joy in their joy, right? It becomes this positive mutual cycle of real magic in the right hands.
100%. And everybody in it is in the moment. They're in this thing. They're in this container. They're all in this thing, and everybody's present. And if you could stuff everybody into a group fMRI machine, you would see 95% of them in flow state. So you would see dimmed prefrontal cortexes. You would see all of this. As a professional who talks to other people and has the ability to set up environments where flow becomes possible with their client, and this is what it looks like, and it can also look like this from an individual standpoint if you are attempting to achieve particular outcomes around this and you're working individually.
Awesome. Well, I mean, let's talk about the triggers, because I think in our last session, you teased a couple of them that seemed important as part of the process, but I think there's a much more expansive list that'll get me thinking more clearly and more excited from a creativity standpoint, how to bring these things to bear in my own projects, in collaboration,
Mm.
in providing mentorship and guidance in others. And so let's talk through those some more. You started, at the top in our first session, just talking about clear goals. So, I mean,
Mhm.
start wherever you want on the list, but clear goals seem to be something that came up as a trigger. And again, as we're stacking these, what does that mean? Take me through what that means from your perspective.
Sure. And so as a financial guy, we want to have clear goals. So this is a real easy one, right? So there is an outcome that I want. Um, and and clarity around what I want financially, what my current state financially is, where I am,
Mm,
where I'm going,
yep.
how I'm going to get there,
Okay.
and setting out really sort of clear goals, which it doesn't sound like rocket science, but some people really kind of fly by the seat of their pants. And I'm not sure what I want it to look like. I'll know it when I see it. That is not a flow trigger. This is what I want. Here's where I am. Here's where I'm going. Let's strategize how to get there.
Right. So in the clear goals trigger, I think this is interesting because I think there's different perspectives that are coming up for me around this. So you may have long form goal, right? My present status, my long form goal. I'd like to have $1 million in my bank account by the time I'm 40, whatever the number is. Right. That's a clear goal. It's time box, is specific, all the traditional markers of a realistic, achievable time box, right? Goal, a clear understanding of where I am today, my current status. I have $5 in my account. I want to get to $1 million, time frame of 10 years, and the process to get there. There may be a lack of clarity around the steps to get there. So that long form goal, but it also feels like you could apply this clear goals process just to the block of time, right? You could have clear goals in the next 90 minutes. What I am going to attempt to accomplish is X, right? It could be a micro goal. Is that fair? And how do you play those against each other?
No, absolutely. And so you can set up layers of clear goals. In the next 90 minutes, our goal is for you to have a very clear, well thought out plan for short, medium, and long-term financial goals. Right. And so you just now you have four sets of clear goals that you have articulated and you are actively in the process of attaining.
So I'm kicking off a session with the client. We're going to work towards the intention, and the goal may be, hey, by the time we're done, it is my intention, my goal that your confidence and clarity around the following things has gone from whatever it is today, a 6 to a 8 or a 9 or a 10. What are your long-term goals? What do they look like? What's the financial effect associated with some of the scenarios that you might be trading off, right? We're going to work towards and deliver you information so that at the end of this time together, you're going to have greater confidence and clarity around what those goals are, how they work, and the specificity around. Like, we can have a goal for a session together, a client and myself, for the time, in addition to, as they're working towards, they now have this information. All right, I want to be able to retire at 63. That's going to require X amount of assets, Y amount of spending, a set of processes and procedures to follow to stay on track with that. That clear goal will be a longer term thing. But if I'm getting up every day on a daily basis, I still need those micro goals to make sure that I'm allocating time and entering into flow state around the work that I need to do to stay in alignment with that long-term goal. So it's playing those against each other, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Really. Uh, and stacking them in a way so, I now have clear goals in my day-to-day life. I now have clear goals. I understand how my investing and or spending and or lifestyle choices this week affect my longest term goals, right? I understand how they affect my medium term goals, which means that I have kind of very clear marching orders on a day-to-day basis that really serve me.
Do you find that in the goal setting process, like, I think through, there's goals that are, I shall not, right? I'm going to resist, or, the goal is behavior not to do, versus positive goals. I will accomplish the following positive goals. So I think in terms of all areas of progress that we imagine we may want to experience, it may be, hey, I want to free up the time to study more to complete this improvement in my life. And so the goal may be do 20 minutes less social media. That may be the goal or the outcome that you're looking for, but is it better to frame it as I will spend X amount first before, frame it as a positive thing that you produce rather than a negative thing that you avoid. In finances, I will spend less, right? Is it one way to frame a goal that somebody might have to get there, versus save more, or, the proactive step to put money away. The goals in framing them, are there aspects to that add value?
Absolutely. And because of the way the brain works, the brain can't not do something. The mind cannot not do something. So don't spend as much money is not something that you can tell the mind to do. And so, right, so allocate allocate liquid asset into savings or investment before allocating it to sort of discretionary spending is a thing you can do, right? What I do is prioritize investment. What I do is privilege savings before privileging discretionary spending.
So
And so,
preferencing your goals around actions that you can take rather than steps you need to resist or avoid.
right. And
Okay.
it's the same thing when you're teaching somebody to backcountry ski or you're teaching somebody to ride a motorcycle. You don't look at the thing that you don't want to hit. Look, riding a motorcycle, you look all the way around the turn, because if you look at the guardrail, you're going to
The
hit the
target lock.
guardrail.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're gonna
You're going to go right into the
backcountry
wall.
ski, if you're backcountry skiing, you don't you don't you don't
Don't
avoid
look at
the
the
tree,
tree.
avoid the tree, avoid the tree, avoid the tree. No, it's follow the path, follow the path. So your energy and your focus is on what you want, not what you don't want.
Got it. All right. Clear goals. Clear goals as a stackable trigger.
Right?
We can't get there all on our own just by having clear goals, as
No.
critical as they are. And as much as they get talked about, huge swaths of literature and tools and resources around goals and atomic goals and James Clear, and there's lots of authors in that area. But clear goals is an important aspect. All right,
Clear
what else?
goals are
What are we
one.
stacking on top?
Immediate feedback, right? Immediate feedback. So when you take an action and you can see the immediate results of that, you get immediate feedback is one of the most powerful sort of triggers that we can get. So if I do this, then this happens. And if I can take an action, which I'm a little bit resistant about, but then I can see immediately the feedback either from my service professional or from my bank account or from something. And I think this is where a lot of people may suffer in these financial conversations because I'm going to put money into this thing and like I'm not quite getting the immediate feedback, or maybe I'm looking for feedback other than what I'm getting.
Well, this is what's being used against us to such a powerful degree in the gamification of everything social media related, right? The post, the click, the physical, visceral reaction that you get as immediate feedback around the positive aspects of behavior. This is what Robinhood did really well. If anybody's ever used the app around trading, when you place a trade, there's confetti that blows up on the screen, right?
Dopamine hit.
Right. There's that, it vibrates and it provides you tactile feedback around the steps that you completed where you start to just enjoy the process of placing trades. Where a historical process of setting money aside out of your paycheck that automatically gets invested so the technology behaves almost insulates you and robs you from that visceral, immediate, positive, hey, way to go. You bought a share of low cost mutual fund. Way to go. Right. So the immediate feedback piece is something that you might have to look for or intentionally brainstorm around in terms of where do you get that visceral, physical, emotional, some sort of feedback. 'Cause I can imagine some of the things that we love to do come with that, right? Part of the joy and sorrow of golf is when you hit the ball, you see where it goes, right? There's immediate feedback around what you just did. I imagine that's some of the surfing experience, right? There's very immediate feedback about how that process plays out and what's going well and what's not going well.
Exactly. And this is where as a professional, you can actually provide that immediate feedback, celebrate small wins, treat setting money aside as victories, right?
Celebration.
Celebrating behaviors that you want to see repeated is the best way you can do it. And every time that money goes in, every time that even if automatic allocation out of that paycheck, I don't know, if I wanted to generate immediate feedback, I would have an email like every single time when money
That's
hits
something.
that account, an immediate way to go. You just increased your
We should have a
portfolio by X
cha-ching
amount.
sound, right?
Look, my wife and I both work from home. We have a big brass ship's bell in our dining room that we ring when we either make money or save money. And it is a visceral, it is an immediate feedback for our family, for our finances, for us as business people and as entrepreneurs. And we ring that bell because we understand how important that immediate, and I'm gonna hear it from the other room. I ring that bell. My wife is in her office. She's gonna go, woohoo! Right? And we hear it.
All right. Immediate feedback in some capacity from the actions that you're taking, either during a project, right? A song, the performance of a song, the engagement of a meeting, right? In a sort of project-based triggering flow states around a 20 to 90-minute engagement, trying to build immediate feedback during that 90 minutes, right?
Right.
That 60 minutes of that immediate feedback, what's working, what's not working, as well as the long form as you're pursuing these steps, trying to get those immediate feedback triggers to become more salient. All right, what's next?
The skills challenge balance is which is a little bit more interesting. And it's it's balancing like boredom and achievement, right? So both boredom and overwhelm kill achievement. If it's too easy, right? If it doesn't require any attention, it's too easy. I get bored. If it's too hard, I get overwhelmed or frustrated. So there should be something that I have to do. There should be asking your clients or you actually moving that money, maybe an amount that is just north of comfortable, right? One of the common suggestions for people to shift their sort of money story is to carry around in cash just a little bit more than you can afford to lose, and just be in the energy of like, this is a lot of money to carry around. This is a lot more money than I generally do or probably should carry around. It's certainly more money than I can afford to lose all in one shot, either by spending or getting robbed or whatever. But it creates this sort of challenge skills balance where now moving around sort of these bigger pieces of money and talking about larger sums of money starts to feel normal. And so we're adjusting that challenge skills balance.
So it's in that there could be some of those engagements that start low flow because I'm learning something new and the skill just isn't there, right? The challenge
Uh-huh.
is too high, the capability is too low, and I'm just constantly confronted with the mechanical aspects of the process. But as I improve my fluency with whatever process this is, my skill improves. The challenge may still be there to some degree. It will taper off and become boring at some point. But in that sweet spot, there's some amount of challenge that keeps me engaged, some amount of skill where I feel competent at the process, and it's pursuing that stretch over long periods of time so that you're always at that sweet spot of the stretch.
Right. So sort of always learning, always improving my vocabulary, always improving my competency, my understanding of more and more complex financial instruments, tools, vehicles, whatever it is. So now I can have more and more advanced conversations with with people who can have really sophisticated financial conversations.
Okay. So the challenge skills balance that it's hard enough but not too hard. Novel, challenge to the skills that I have and the challenge that I'm presented with from a stretch, yeah, stretching just outside, but not too far.
Right. So I have to lean in. I have to continue to learn in order to stay on top of this. Deep concentration. And this is what we kind of talked about earlier. We need more than 15 minutes of this, right? We're gonna really talk about some complex strategy and some we're gonna get into this. And I need your full participation for the next 90 minutes or for the next hour. So if we can stretch past that 15-minute mark, 20-minute mark, and retain that deep concentration. We're really looking at sort of challenging things that require heavy brain use. This is why a good 60-minute or 90-minute block where we can hit those things is really important.
So deep concentration and focus. I'm finding that I got to do my own mental work to some degree so that I've got the capability to be focused on something without distraction for that extended period of time. Like that deep concentration and focus on something is dependent on novelty and interest, but it also is dependent on just my mental cognitive capability to not be distracted by stuff that comes in or to maintain focus. Are you finding that work in that area helps improve somebody's ability to deep concentration, and what does that look like? If I want my arms to be stronger, I know the moves to do to physically improve that muscle. What's the deep concentration muscle improvement?
It is meditation in any form. Meditation is the art of returning, coming back coming back to this thing like training a puppy or a small child with just infinite patience and just I notice that my mind has wandered, no problem, bring it back to my breath. Bring it back to my breath.
Okay,
Bring
so
it
deep
back.
concentration is a flow trigger. So we've got clear goals, immediate feedback. We've got the challenge skills balance and deep concentration, right? Beyond the I'm waiting for my opportunity to talk, but I'm paying attention and hearing and applying and connected to what's going on presently around me. All right.
And that's another one is close listening, is really paying attention to what is going on, really paying attention to what your other person is saying, taking it in, asking good questions, like really kind of synthesizing that information, right? Bringing it in, repeating it back, close listening. Am I getting what this person is saying? Am I asking questions? Am I really synthesizing this information in a way that is useful and productive? So close listening is another flow trigger.
Not surprised, right? That deep concentration and close listening are related concepts and could be applied depending. Deep concentration close listening may not matter if I'm in front of an Excel spreadsheet, right? And
Mhm.
I'm trying to get flow triggers started for that. But the close listening is that deep concentration in team, right? In relationship.
In relationship. Exactly. Exactly. And when we talk about in relationship, two very close triggers, blending of egos and equal participation. Two more flow triggers. If one person is dominating the conversation, dominating the the engagement, flow really can't happen. It's when there's a blending of egos. What do you think? What do you want to do? What is the thing? And equal participation. It's not a lecture. It's a conversation. It is a collaboration.
It's a relationship, right? It's a engaged, committed relationship, bidirectional, right? That required piece. Unrelated to that, do you find that flow is much more successfully achieved in a group environment when you're physically present rather than virtually present?
Yes, and of course, when we are in physical proximity to each other, there are more triggers, right? So we're now in a container. We're now the ability for close listening is is greater because there's less distraction. When it's just you and me in a room together, there's way less distractions rather than you and me in a Zoom room where I may have my email up on this screen and social media up on that screen. My phone's buzzing while we're talking.
I know
So
there must be physiological, physical, chemical components of being human, right? That are connected to that group flow state, pheromones or
sure,
mirror neurons or components that are really just hard to replicate virtually because you're just not physically in the same space, even on a preconscious level of things that your body is picking up from the other human that structured correctly from establishing trust that trigger might be more valuable physically present for some of those physical things.
absolutely. And this is where we talk about shared risks, shared
Mm.
experience, right? So if there's a sense, so a great example would be if you're my wealth manager and we're talking about an investment, there's a sense of shared risk. You want this to succeed as much as I do because we both have a financial stake in this, right? And for you, it may look like commission or one thing or another. But for me, that's my life saving. But I need to know that you have a stake in my success. I have a stake in my client's success. So there's a sense of shared risk. There's a sense of it's not just you going, well, you could do this and good luck with that. And but when there's a sense of shared risk that you have a stake either reputationally or financially in the advice that you're giving, I feel better about taking that advice.
So if I've got, yeah, interesting to think through that recommendation. It's not that, in many of these recommendations, if they don't work out, what is the negative effect to me as a recommender, right? In a medical context, right? I recommend that you take this pill and the risk, there are risks associated with it. There's risks if you don't, there's risks if you misdo it, there's risk associated with the treatment. But I, as the prescriber, I'm not taking the drug,
No
right?
shared risk at all.
You know, I am on record making the recommendation. So I take reputational or professional liability risks that the recommendation is wrong, right? That's as the recommender or the physician, right? I'm staking my reputation, I'm staking my career, I'm staking my financial resources that this is the right thing for you based on the available information that I have and the mastery of the process. Is my financial risk, like a physician's, big enough of a shared risk? Or is it now we're into perception of where in a group dynamic, what I'm sharing from a risk perspective, or is it much more the vulnerability, right? My ability to be vulnerable in my own challenges in pursuing goals and opening up and willingness. Take me through that a little bit.
So this is you're exactly right. And so that's we don't necessarily like compare risk, right? it's really more about vulnerability. It really is more about there is a mutual vulnerability. The audience and the performer, there is a mutual vulnerability there. They're very different, right? But I'm spending my time, my money, I'm entering a huge crowd. I'm leaving my house, I'm going to a venue.
But
There's
even
a
opening yourself up to the performance, right? There's a vulnerability to be present and opening yourself up to the performer to let that, there's an awakening or an opening that won't happen if it really feels like this is a canned delivery that you've done 1,000 times and isn't you present to, I mean, you can pick up on some of those performances where, this is the 1,000th night in a row that I've delivered in the same way in the same fashion, and it doesn't have the same sparkly connection. Then I don't open myself up in the same way to receive that performance. So there is, I think, in the audience example, there is a lot of vulnerability that opens up to be present and hopeful for that connection that gets returned, my joy delivered back, the connection back delivered in an improved performance in that dance. Same is often true, I think, in the recommender recommendee, regardless of the context, right, as part of that process rather than a should. It's a mutual discovery. This is what you should do. I'm going to should on you.
Mhm.
I'm going to mansplain to you how this works, as opposed to, that being vulnerable and uncovering both directions, my vulnerability and offering, right, the risk that I take, that this is the best for you, that I worry about you, that my clients keep me up at night. My 85-year-old just called me and he's still caring for his son and spending financial resources, and I worry for him, right? My vulnerability to help him execute that. So shared risk, also shared vulnerability. There's some tie there.
Right. So it could be very, very well explained, expressed as shared vulnerability. We don't need to have necessarily like sort of comparable risk, but there needs to be a mutual vulnerability one way or the other. And so there's shared risk in that there is vulnerability present on both sides or all sides, depending on how big the team, how many participants in the relationship. Then there's the last two are so good. There is autonomy and mastery, right? There is this idea that I'm growing in a way that I can operate this sort of autonomously, right? That I am clear about. So I call you and you have walked me through the last 10 years of my wealth management, and I see something, I hear something, I read something, and I call you and I go, "Hey, John, I want to do this. I want to move this to this. this looks interesting to me. I'm super interested in it." I was in a thing earlier today where we were talking about AI. We were talking about investing in the companies that are
Around the
producing.
concepts and
Yeah. And this idea that I believe that there's going to be huge growth in AI and in the future, and by the way, I'm a flow state coach. I am not a financial advisor. This is not
understood.
financial advice.
Right.
This is me getting wrapped up in the excitement of the things that I'm excited about. But being able to go, John, I'm really excited about this. I want to invest in this. I want to move some money into this. And your ability to honor that autonomy, honor that sense of mastery. Look, we've been working together a long time. You've picked up a lot of vocabulary, you've picked up a lot of proficiency around this. I think that you're clear about the risk. I think that you know what you're talking about. And I honor that.
No, I think I came across this linkage of autonomy and mastery. It's been a couple of decades, but it was almost associated with, early stages of employee engagement in terms of how employees feel engaged in the roles that they perform at work, which is, again, uncovering are there flow triggers, right? We could connect
Mm.
those. But the writer was talking about connecting or trying to figure out how to connect for people, a sense of autonomy. Can I control my workspace and my job and how I do my work, how I do what I want to do? Mastery, my feeling like I'm improving. They linked purpose, autonomy, mastery, and purpose was what the author was linking together. From a work state standpoint, can you improve engagement by linking those together? In this space, right, autonomy is, can I do what I want in the way that I want to do it? And do I feel like I have enough knowledge and training about how to do it? Right. And those together. The autonomy, when you say that to me, right, that sense of, I'm not being told what to do. I don't have restrictions being placed on me. I can do this in the way that is unique and personal to me. I've got control over how I want to do this. And again, I'm not being should on or mansplained to or directed based on concerns around conflict or you should buy this one and not that one because this one's better for me and not for you. And I mean all the different autonomy and mastery as a stackable flow trigger. Do I feel like I have control in this moment of to my experience, right? I think through as you take me through my own breath work, that sense that you have autonomy to control your own experience in that meditative state, right? In terms of you've got complete control over how fast, how slow I breathe as part of that. We talk about that. You provide that education during your flow classes, your breathwork classes.
Yeah. And giving people the grace of autonomy and mastery. So working in collaboration with people, giving people the grace of that. Your example with your employees and giving people everybody is entitled to the dignity of their own experience, right? And so allowing people to sort of take some autonomy, develop that mastery. What do you want to learn? What do you want to get better at? Or kind of pulling back some of your direction around something that you would like to see somebody improve in, right? And so allowing them a little more autonomy to develop that mastery, right? And it's super important. And when we feel like I have agency here and I'm getting better at it, and through that agency, I'm getting better at what I do, that is a huge flow trigger because we get excited, right? Holy shit, I think I'm getting good at this. I think I'm starting to really get good at this. And if we can get good at something, we'll really like doing it.
Right. Right. Especially if I feel like it's my choice, right? It's my decision. I've got some sense of control over managing and moderating, right? The level of the experience. I think that sounds like an attractive trigger to lay on top. Okay.
Right.
So autonomy mastery, right?
And finally we have novelty and unpredictability, right? If it Once again we talked about boredom, if it gets boring, there is something about novelty. The brain loves novelty. The brain loves unpredictability within a structure. Right? Novelty within, it's not going to go wild off the rails, right? Because now the risk factor is too high and now I can't drop into flow state because the risk factor is really high. But the novelty of an experience, the novelty and unpredictability of sort of financial structures, of financial vehicles and processes, and the world is a turbulent place at present. And there's a lot of flow, entrepreneurship, investment, all of these things provide a really, really rich environment for flow.
Right. And I think that's intuitive or insightful for me to hear, right? That there is that range within which the novelty and unpredictability goes too far, becomes distracting. And then, as we talked about, might affect your ability to stay concentrated, right? It becomes too novel or distracting. But the absence, right? If you're doing the same thing over and over, you become dead inside to the process and there's no ability to experience the vulnerability that's present, right? And it feels like in some of these contexts that there can be novelty and unpredictability, even in what seems on the surface to be a mass of sameness, right? Where somebody on the outside, I think about some of the things that you described in delivering food as a profession, right? There's only so many, you know, meals on the menu that you're going to produce and deliver. Like if you're going to do 100 Caesar salads, trying to get novelty and unpredictability around the process of delivering that to somebody might be hard to find.
Until somebody orders, a table of orders 12 of them while you're trying to put out 6 mixed green salads and whatever, like, at the same time. The novelty is in real lifeness of all of it, because it's gonna come. Yes, I'm gonna perform the same sort of executable moves, but the way it's gonna come in, the pacing it's gonna come in, the volume it's gonna come in at, and then set off by the needs of the other people down the line from me to produce these things, to quicken or slow my pace based on a million other factors. It's a novelty rich, it's a novelty rich environment. It's certainly an unpredictable environment, which is just my favorite thing in the whole world. I thrive on novelty. It's why I love breath work. It's why I love
I mean,
working
in
with people.
the same is true in, I mean, I think the process of breaking down what does it take to create a change in your felt sense of financial abundance, however you want to describe it, my wealth situation, the money that I own, whatever it is. The steps by and large are not that mysterious and unknowable, right? They're pretty well understood, but how each person experiences them is always going to be novel and unpredictable, right? Being present for somebody in that conversation, or how they go through it, or what surprises come up, or, we often talk about the fact that, you know, it is not a surprise that surprises come up. The surprise is the source of it, right? I mean, life throws you curveballs. It's not a curveball that one showed up. The only reason that it's a curveball was just didn't see that particular one coming. Novelty and unpredictability. Um, okay, so that's a bunch of triggers to stack.
And so if we look at, like, take any five of them. So if you're in a situation where you have clear goals, immediate feedback, there's some deep concentration, there's some close listening required, and it is a novel environment. It's kind of ever-changing environment, and one where you can get good at. We're now deep into flow state. We are now 6 triggers deep. We do this over the course of an hour or 90 minutes, and whatever that project is, however we set this up, so long as there's no distractions, in that there's nothing outside of this thing that we're working on that has all of these triggers, we can now enter this really powerful, highly creative, highly productive, unique thinking cognitive state that allows lateral comparisons and really stretching outside of what we would normally come up.
Awesome. So more creativity, more productivity during that time frame, especially in collaborative endeavors, which much of this is going to require, right? Whether it's me and a professional, whether it's me and a partner, right? A spouse or a family member, right? Trying to work collaboratively towards a financial goal. A lot of this is going to need to be in a collaborative fashion, in a group dynamic, in a situation where it may be hard in some of these situations to establish, the vulnerability and shared risk might not always work as a trigger in some of these instances. So leaning on some of the others to try to find those states where you can move through a lot of stuff and get a lot done during that particular period.
Right. Right. And it's gonna look like this, like, series of brainstorming, and time's gonna sort of dilate on you, and your appointment's gonna end, and you go, yo, that was 90 minutes. And then you get to look, did we accomplish our goals? Right. And if you look down, you go, wow, we not only did we blow past our goals by the 45-minute mark, but we have now stretched into goals that we couldn't have imagined at the beginning of this conversation. We are now accomplishing things that weren't even on the table at the beginning of the conversation, because we created such a rich environment. We blew straight through every goal that we had for this conversation. And we're now in, like, creative, collaborative, expansive territory.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the real world stories that come up for me as I come across folks who reach out to me and we establish a connection and we're talking through the process. Many of my clients have already experienced a great deal of wealth creation process, right? They start and grew and have matured a business, right? They're an entrepreneur. They started and grew. And now they're at the later stages of trying to figure out how to monetize that. And all you could do is sit back and be in awe of the process that they must have experienced, right? The process of value creation in that area, that idea of the entrepreneur. I often joke part of the reason that most business owners start their own business is because they make really crappy employees, right? They just want control over their experience and their lives, and they're very confident in their own. And then as they build those things that they love to do, they're at that nexus of autonomy and mastery, right? There's novelty and unpredictability in their process, but in alignment with real clear goals. Like in the first year, I want to not die.
Yeah, I'd like to not starve to death in the first year of business.
I'd like to not be the 8 out of 10 fail in the first year, right? So the clear goal of covering payroll, the immediate feedback in a lot of these instances with employees or customers or suppliers is immediate. Like, here's my experience, and they don't buy it. And you get no's, like in sales, right? You get immediate. The skills challenge gap can be hard in the beginning, but if you can get into that, this is where often I encounter business owners at the tail end of that, right? And they've mastered much of what's available to master in their context, right? They have their individual contributor role as a salesperson or a producer. They run a department and they grow and stretch, and there's some skills challenge gap that they master, and they, that starts to tail off, and then they run an organization or start a company, right? And there's another stretch there, and then the question is, what's next? Right. And so sometimes that's where I come across, it feels like I have to do something different because this isn't what it used to be. Right. And maybe they're not using the language. I don't enter into flow state like I used to. That's not the language that they use, but it's burnout or distraction or other thing, right?
Right.
Something that's coming up.
They could be living in both boredom and overwhelm. Right. I am overwhelmed by, I'm sort of in a new phase of my life. I'm starting to look into at kind of landing this plane. And I'm so bored with what I'm doing. I've been doing this for a long time. I started this business at nothing. I've built it into what it is. I'm
Yeah, I
not
mean,
doing a lot these days.
I've got a guy who professionally works with his hands by and large, and he built this lovely organization that customers seek out for his particular blue collar service. He's grown it to the point, though, that he doesn't work with his hands anymore. And to some degree, he craves the time when he could make it small and himself work on projects. He misses that piece that really got him into what he was doing. And he grew this organization because he had clear goals around providing for his family and growing his organization. But that's been done, right? We crossed that finish line. He could light that business on fire and his family would be fine, right? Pterodactyls show up and he gets eaten. His wife and kids are cared for, probably their generation and maybe the next. But for him, that connection to that sense of mastery, the delivery, the tactile sense of the service that he delivers is a very immediate feedback. It's stucco and drywall in a very high-end context. It's a pretty interesting when you layer these on, that flow trigger that could potentially, it's like artistry to some degree, but it's collaborative, it's team environment. It takes a crew to deliver that experience. Yeah, it's interesting.
And moving into that next place is wild, because the thing that used to give him the thing that had so many flow triggers for him at one point is now no longer available. And it's just not where he is anymore. And so there is what feels like a death, a death of who I am, of who I was.
There's definitely a grief in a lot of these changes.
But there's an equal number of flow triggers in the moving into, so what is next, right? There's a new set of skills. There's a new set of mastery. There's a new set of novelty and unpredictability, with a new set of clear goals that can be created in relationship
This
with
is
an
why the
advisor.
framework is so valuable, right? Because if this is all I've known, right, and I'm entering into phase two, whatever that looks like, if I don't have clear goals around that, no longer is it money, right? I need X amount to care for my family or produce for my kids, right? Now I think to some degree that flow trigger is problematic for this phase, right? What are my
Hmm.
clear goals? That one's harder, right? The skills gap could be big, right? Because I've mastered all of this stuff. Now I need to learn something totally new, right? So the skills gap becomes a challenge, right? And, maybe that, so it's trying to find these together. Some of them it is, you see, I often will see these entrepreneurs continuing to chase, what feel to me like risky decisions with their money. And maybe that's one of the things that they are, chasing is that shared risk, that sense of, component to enter into, find those flow states that they're not getting anywhere else. I mean, it's
Hmm.
like, I think it was She Sent Me High,
Hmm.
who talked about it's almost like oxygen, right? If you rob somebody of flow states long enough, there's a cognitive load, a death that starts to creep in at that side of the process.
100%. Right. And so we see that all of these processes, flow state processes, wealth building, wealth management, meditation, skills, life stages, they're all built the same. They're all built the same, and they all require sort of the same skill sets and then transition skill sets, one to the next, to the next, to the next, and
Yeah, I
and
mean,
really.
there's a good example. So in a lot of faith circles, when a couple, husband and wife, not to be specific, but it just as the example of a generation, you're talking, let's call it currently age 75 to 85, in that age range. Demographically speaking, I'm not saying this is a should, but husband primary income earner, spouse primary housemaker, the collaborative team. The husband's now retired. If the wife dies first, nearly universally, the husband's dead in 18 months. Because if we use flow triggers on top of that, his flow triggers are her blending egos, the equal participation. Like if we're assuming that that's a healthy bidirectional relationship, the close listening, the clear goals and immediate feedback. Like
Of
my wife
course.
gives me immediate feedback all the time. So, now is gone at spouses, flow triggers, right? As another way to see those triggers in real life. Interesting.
Absolutely. And seeing how all of these things are the same. It's all the same, and being able to find sort of that peace and find sort of that rhythm and that breath in all of it, that cyclic sense, and understand that wherever I am in my life, I can fully engage by being fully engaged. I can really develop wherever I am in life by dropping in, getting fully engaged, practice those skill sets of concentration, focus, and attention.
So we could make the most common flow triggers available as a download associated with this episode. And then as people are thinking about a practical application, right? We've talked about tools that people could apply, but in general, if I have money as a goal, right? And I'm going to assign work blocks to myself to move the needle in my own life in my money goals. Part of it would be to start to intentionally printing out, here's the triggers. How can I modify my space and my experience with control over my time and energy and effort to, if I'm going to spend 60 to 90 minutes on a project to move the needle from a wealth perspective, that 60 to 90 minutes, which sometimes there's somebody on this podcast who doesn't have a free 60 or so. If I'm going to carve 60 or 90 minutes from something else that's already super important, it's got to count, right? I mean, it's got to be as productive as possible because I might not get 5 of them in a week. So it's, picking a couple and playing with while you're committed to whatever work project that you're dedicating to around improving your your situation around money or wealth or abundance or whatever your goal is. Is that the approach? You try to do them all? I mean, what do you recommend people, they play with.
The best thing, yeah, I mean, having a list of the flow triggers, and I think putting a list of these and a description of them in the show notes is great. So you'll find them there. But looking at the things that you have agency of right now, I have agency in my calendar. I have agency in how much time I can put something. I have agency in how much attention I can put to something. Creating these clear goals, creating a place where I can be completely focused. Flow follows focus, period, full stop. So creating environments where I can be completely focused and start stacking in these flow triggers and really engaging things that are interesting to me, things that I have goals around and can put some energy into.
I'm on it.
John, another good conversation. Always
Can't
good to
wait for
talk
the
to you.
next one.
All right. Next time we will talk about something cool. We haven't figured that out yet, but we will. So, John O'Dea, thank you very much. Thanks for listening to the Flow of Money podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about John and Dave at theflowofmoneypodcast.com. If you liked this episode, share it with someone who's ready to step into flow. If you're interested in sponsorship or collaboration, we'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Hey, before you go, this is John O'Dea here with a quick note. I am affiliated with Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC, and my investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc. Dave Gieselman, my partner, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions are mine and Dave's. These opinions are not necessarily those of Raymond James. Every investor situation is unique, and you should consider your investment goals, risk tolerance, and time horizon before making any investment decisions. Neither Raymond James Financial Services nor Raymond James Financial Advisors render any tax advice. Tax matters should be discussed with your tax advisor. This podcast is for investor education purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment advice. Consult your investment advisor before making investment decisions.